11 years old, when she was first exposed to gender corruption theory through online platforms. Chloe is an amazing woman, now a 19-year-old from Central Valley of California and a former trans kid who detransitioned after undergoing years of puberty blockers and an irreversible mutilation of a double mastectomy at the age of 15. Chloe is suing Kaiser, who performed the mutilation surgery, and traveling across the country. She's on a tour to share her story, raise the alarm, and warn other potential victims about the abusive gender transition procedures on children. Thank you for all you are doing, Chloe, for speaking the truth and your efforts to stop this evil. Since our last interview, how have you been? You look great.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been doing pretty good. I've been pretty busy. Just speaking out on behalf of my experience and going around to different state legislatures, speaking to different communities.
Well, they love you out there, apparently. You testified before Congress. I'd like to hear about that since our last interview. And how were you received in Congress? I mean, there's all these people on both sides. I know that your colleague was there, Riley Gaines, who you're a partner with in the sense of your political campaign and education outreach. Can you give us some highlights of your testimony before Congress?
Yeah, that was on my 19th birthday that I did that, and it was probably one of my most incredible birthdays so far. And I mean, it was just a huge precedent. It was really exciting to be a part of it because it was the first time that I had ever testified in Congress and not within a state legislature. And it's one of the first times that this issue of gender has been addressed so far up.
You testified before the Ohio legislature recently. Can you tell me how you were received there, and can you give us some highlights from your trip through Ohio there, your conquest?
Yeah, so Ohio was actually one of the first states that I publicly testified in, and the bill on the protection of children has been something that's been revised 3 times over the past 3 years. It's been kind of frustrating. It's been really frustrating actually to get it moved through. And I wasn't there to provide testimony recently, but I was there for the overturning of the governor's veto, which was just incredible to watch.
Well, that was quite a vote. The legislature overrode Liberal Governor Mike DeWine's veto, with the Senate voting to make the prohibition on trans surgery on children the law in Ohio, 28 yes to 8 no. So you were there for that moment.
Yeah, and it was just an incredible shock that he even vetoed it. Just a few days before he did, he met with children's hospitals, which many of which are in that state, are within the Midwest, are a hotbed for that in that area. So of course they're going to incentivize and pressure this for him. But he also met with me over Zoom to speak about my experience. That veto turned out to be a blessing in disguise, as we've seen, because it brought a lot of media attention from across the country to the state, to this bill.
Well, Governor DeWine is also an idiot, okay, and a moron. And if I could say anything worse, I would. But for 30 years, he's always played both sides. You know, he makes, these with the wind. He's always been that way as a senator. And as a governor, it's disgusting that you had to see such behavior, even after you appealed to him. And frankly, he's don't underestimate his stupidity. He thought he had you over a barrel. And because of God's blessing and your leadership and your consistent, patient testimony, frankly, your testimony is painful, okay, to listen to for those who don't understand this topic or don't want to hear this topic or don't want to understand what can happen. They look at criminal victims. They look at victims of violent crime. And they should understand that you are the victim of what could be and should be considered a violent crime. But they have given you no sympathy. They swallow the political swill. And to see Governor DeWine personify that, I mean, he's literally drinking from a sewer of lies and calling it Kool-Aid. But, you know, you gave him the benefit. And now we all know what a turncoat he is. I mean, you know, instead of me just whining about DeWine, now the whole country knows what DeWine is. And it's a very important state, the national election. And your role in this national election, in my opinion, can't be underestimated. My opinion, right? For whatever that's worth. But I have been involved in the national elections for a while. In 2016, Public Advocate, if I haven't told you this, filed a Freedom of Information and then had to go to court to order the federal government to produce the information that we were looking for. And of course, at the time, 2016, Obama was president, and Obama had made a statement that there was plenty of people wanting him to issue the transgender executive order. Lots of people, tons of people. So we asked for, who are they in our Freedom of Information Act? And it took them 8 months. And in the end, the federal judge, they argued to the federal judge, it takes a lot of work to get this stuff. I said, hold on. President of the United States says that there's tons of people. And our supposition, our preposition, our proposal was there's nobody. And therefore, it shouldn't be that hard to find out about nobody. I thought he was lying. And lo and behold, the judge agreed with me and my reasoning that, hey, if Eugene's right, it should be easy to figure out who's for the transgender executive order. And boom, they produced it. And there were 5 people who wrote President Obama about the transgender executive order that were private individuals nationwide. Hundreds of thousands of people opposed it, but there were 5. That helped focus then candidate Donald Trump and the entire Christian movement on this topic. At the time, there were only 5 people that cared about this issue nationwide. This kind of created a wedge issue in the 2016 election. But that's a little political history to understand Public Advocate's role in terms of exposing the transgenders. I don't think we're going to get any major write-up in the New York Times anytime soon. Any updates regarding your lawsuit? As what's going on with the doctors who mutilated you? Is there an update that you're allowed to say?
Yeah, so last year I filed a lawsuit against three of the doctors who put me through the course of my medical transition, the endocrinologist, the surgeon, and the gender specialist who evaluated me for surgery, which was really only roughly about like a 15-20 minute evaluation. It was the entire process was just incredibly expedited, as well as my entire healthcare provider, Kaiser Permanente, and the hospital where I underwent surgery. As of right now, there aren't any updates that I can give on it.
Okay. There aren't any right now. Okay, got it. No problem.
Not right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know that you're in the middle of the fight. We know that you're in the fight. So we want to know, hey, anything new that we could talk about? No. Okay. Since we last spoke, this is, broader question. Have you received more support from either the left or the right? I mean, we see what's going on with the homosexuals. They are really upset that people are dragging them into this surgery and denying womanhood to women. It's like trending every day on social media. Every platform has thousands of people really angry that they're doing, it's LGB without the TQ, that kind of thing. And so I'm looking at that and going, well, who is going to hear about this? You're going to hear about this. What have you heard? So,
I mean, obviously, when it comes to legislatures, it's been a lot easier working with Republicans mostly. Of course, that there are people who are Republican in name only and are too afraid to tackle this issue. And there also have been Democrats who have conceded to this, who know what is right. But when it comes to just the normal people who support me, I mean, this is something that is very clearly not a political issue. It's something regarding humanity and basic truth. So my followers, the people who support me, are really all across all the different, really are across the political spectrum, people of all sorts of different backgrounds and ideologies. And many of them are Democrats. Many of them are lifelong Democratic voters. Many of them are part of the LGB. Many of them are feminists and people who were part of these historical movements that they feel as though the transgender movement is basically reverting progress from.
Thank you. What advice would you give to other girls that are considering this mutilating surgery? Because I talk to a lot of people, and really there's a lack of information, and you really are the number one exposer, if you will, or educator on this in the country, which I know don't let it go to your head, but you are literally the top critic of this surgery in the United States. So what would you tell anybody right now about this?
If I were to speak to anybody going through this right now, I would say that the entire premise of this is a lie. You cannot change your sex, and your gender is not separate from your sex, from the way that you're born or your body. But there's nothing wrong with the way that you're born. There is nothing wrong with being made into a man or a woman. It's a gift. It's your birthright. And you might not always feel like you fit inside the mold of what you think men or women should be like. But that's something that's beautiful. There is always variation in human beings. That is something that we should appreciate and uplift. Just because you're masculine as a woman or because you're feminine as a man doesn't make you the opposite sex. It's something that makes you unique. That is something to cherish.
Thank you. I have 6 children, and I have to say that my daughters are probably the strongest women I know, besides my wife, of course. But they come from a background where the parents, my wife and I together, over the last 41 years, just encouraged them to be who they feel they should be. And they are absolutely as strong as any person I know in the sense that they are not going to get driven over. They're not going to get ridden over. So this is something that appeals to me that you would say that. What would you say to others? Yes.
I'd like to add to that your identity doesn't come from what you call yourself or the way that you dress or present yourself or what you like or consume. It comes from the things that you do. It comes from the work that you do for your family and for the community around you. And that's what you should be basing your identity off of.
Amen. What would you say to others who are considering to detrans and get out of the lie? So you went through that period of time where you were about to question the whole topic, and you broke free of the hold that this environment had on you. Somebody out there is considering this right now, on the one hand, surgery, on the other hand, the whole environment. What are you thinking that would help them come to terms with this propaganda that it has hold of them?
It's something that will be incredibly difficult, especially within the first few months to within the first year. And it might feel incredibly lonely, but you are far from alone. There is an entire community of people out there just like you. And no matter what you've been through, you are still whole, no matter what these doctors or what this community has taken from you.
Thank you. I have spoken to moms. What would you say to moms out there dealing with this topic?
To mothers out there dealing with this? Well, I think to any parents, whether or not your child is already dealing with this is something that you're going to have to address with your child. And sooner is better than later, because they're going to learn about it, whether you like it or not, whether it be through school, through the curriculum, through their peer groups, through the internet, even through video games and the communities around them. This has made its way into every single part of our culture. And you have to tackle this with your child and address the truth with them and teach them how to discern between fantasy and reality before outside influences get to them. And if you're dealing with this with your own child right now, do not affirm. Do not affirm this in any capacity. Do not affirm their preferred name, their preferred pronouns. Do not call them by the opposite sex or whatever they identify as. Because if you concede any ground, you're feeding this idea that your child has, that the way that they were made was wrong and that it has to be fixed. It's a lie. No child is born in the wrong body, and no child deserves to believe that. You have to affirm their identity as they were made. You have to talk with this. You have to talk through this with them. You have to have those hard conversations with them, no matter how uncomfortable. Because your child is relying on you to build their identity, to help them become mature adults who can live life to the fullest. You should be asking them, where are these feelings coming from? Why do you think that the way that you're made was wrong? Why do you think that you have to change? And you have to be their rock in reality. You have to help them build their identity, not through what games they play, what clothes they wear, but what they do through their hobbies, through their skills. I think that it's during that critical developmental period, especially during adolescence, it's important to feel like you have a role in your community. And so things like sports and school clubs, playing an instrument, being as part of a school band, I think are pretty critical to development during that point in time.
Thank you. It is parents need to protect their children from this evil, and it is evil. That is the feedback I get from supporters of Public Advocate and people who post and write to us. Poor innocent children You started at age 11 with this, experience. That is a very early age for a child. You're no longer a child, of course. You're 19, and what has happened is the country has been overrun with this propaganda and this monopoly on what is considered, when you were 11, to be a terrible thing. But yet it got through the medical establishment, and so we're fighting the medical establishment. Going ahead, I mentioned this presidential election. The likely nominee for the Democrats at this moment is Joe Biden. Likely Republican nominee is Donald Trump. Looking at the Congress and the Senate, considering your role in the political world that we live in, and the educational, the environment, the civilization as we know it, what are the key actions to take this year? I don't want to put too much of a big picture on it, but I already laid it out there. How do we end this abusive child mutilation in this country? We have 24 states that have made it, and Kansas is coming up, and South Carolina. But frankly, a president, a Congress, a Senate, what do you see as a key action today to end this mutilation?
I think it's important to become involved in your community if you aren't already. It starts at the community level. You have to be involved in your child's school, keep up with curriculum, be part of the school boards, and make sure that this is not part of their curriculum, that this is not in any way being introduced to children, that parents are always included in the picture, and that children are not being introduced to these inappropriate ideas by influences other than their parents. And we have to put pressure on our state politicians to implement these measures to protect the rights of our communities, children and families, and our rights as parents.
Well, I agree with you. And do you think that America's governors have an obligation? There's now 24 states. Kansas is coming up, and South Carolina. Do you think those governors have an obligation to sign into laws, the governors, to protect children from the transgender industry and from being permanently mutilated? Do you have plans to give your testimony in Kansas or South Carolina, or to Skype over there, or Zoom over there?
Not yet so far, but I believe some friends of mine are going to testify in those states. But I absolutely believe that as a governor, as a part of the legislature of your state, you have a duty to protect the rights of your constituents' families and their children, to make sure that their children grow up healthy and fully intact, and that they are legally protected from these procedures, from these abuses. You
have mentioned friends. And by the way, we encourage you to do anything in Kansas and South Carolina that you can do. Your friends, we have noticed you and Riley Gaines on the panel last year at CPAC. Of course, she's a national star, probably in the world. She is the biggest critic of men and women's sports. There's no other international figure that has as wide a path as she does. And we, of course, support her in her fight from the very beginning. We have brought millions of supporters to her online for 3 years before we met you. But how do they about Riley Gaines? I'd like to hear your comments about her, and if you could tell me about the coalition I assume that you're part of. You were one detransitioner a year ago. Now there are 12 being interviewed by the New York Times. I would like to hear your feedback about your colleagues, your friends, your army.
Yeah, so, before I started publicly speaking out even, I entered some of the online communities around detransition to find a place of solace, of support, of understanding what I've been through. And really, it's these friends of mine who often feel more like brothers and sisters who have kept me going in this fight. Just knowing that there are other people out there like me has motivated me to keep fighting for them and to make sure that our stories do not repeat in history. But as I've started becoming a public advocate, I've noticed that there's been a huge influx and many people detransitioning and desisting and coming forward with their stories online, and many of them even following in the footsteps of mine, going to their state legislatures and testifying to protect the rights of kids. And it's just it's just been incredible to watch and be a part of.
That's beautiful. That is really beautiful. Wow, what a testimony to have an impact like that. Are doctors and nurses and therapists morally responsible? I mean, people. That's another question I get from supporters and online commenters. How are the doctors and nurses and therapists not morally responsible for the harm that has been done and is being done to children in the name of gender affirmation? And of course, without getting into your lawsuit, that's the whole premise of the lawsuit. Should they be held legally responsible? Isn't that really the general focus of your mission, to kind of raise the standard of medical practice in the country from what it has become and what it should be?
Absolutely. I think that the current standard right now for this is something that actually goes against the standards of care for medicine in general. Every doctor swears an oath to do no harm, and by interrupting and stopping a child's natural healthy development into an adult, by making children into lifelong patients and to slaves to the pharmaceutical industry, to taking away their perfectly healthy body parts and their fertility, their sexual function before they're even adults. Every single part of that is just criminal. And many doctors feel like that they don't have any other choice but to partake in this. But by being complacent, you are being compliant. You have a duty to your patient over your profession.
Would that be a possible ally for you, someone in the medical community deciding that they're going to take on? I mean, we have this with COVID, we have this with the masks, we have this with the vaccines, and so on. Certain individuals stand up and then they get wiped out, slaughtered, deplatformed, investigated, and basically put out of business. Would that occur if someone were to speak against this in the medical community?
Yeah, and I've worked with doctors who have lost their jobs or have stopped working in the medical industry because they couldn't stand to be a part of this.
Okay, well,
whistleblower Jamie Reed is one of them.
Jerry, what's her name?
Jamie Reed.
Jamie Reed. We'll look that up.
Jamie Reed. She worked in a gender clinic actually, and she saw the abuses that were going on.
Well, we will look her up and see what her story is and report about her sad story. Let's talk about victories for a second. We were in Maine. We were helping them. We were providing testimony about the proposal in the Democrat-dominated liberal Maine about their declaring, like California is a transgender sanctuary state. They were going to welcome all the surgery that they could pack into Maine, and if you go into Maine, you cross over the state line, boom, you become, what do they call it, a police action. Your parents would be prevented from stopping this. They could come in, child, driven there, become a sanctuary state, and then they voted it down, 12-0. Democrat-dominated Judiciary Committee voted it down and said, no, we're going to kill this bill this year. Does this possibility of similar laws trouble you or worry you in any way?
California actually has a very similar law that makes it a sanctuary state for children to run away to, or for, say, like one parent to bring their child to away from the other parent to transition their child. It's evil. It's unconstitutional, I believe. And it's going to tear families apart. It's enabling trafficking of children.
Now, have there been any? I'm interested in punishing a state like California for having that type of possibility. We have one here in Virginia. We passed a law here where you're just not allowed to automatically traffic a child. The state trafficked the child, and we had to pass a law. The child was taken into custody in Virginia, ended up in Maryland, and then back and forth the child went, and they named a new law introduced by Delegate David LaRock. He's now a former delegate, but he introduced it. It was passed, signed into law, that you can't just take children at least in Virginia, and farm them out, and essentially be responsible for a lot of harm that was done to this poor victim. There is
I believe you're talking about the case of Sage.
Yes, yes. Terrible, terrible experience there. Yes. So they passed a law saying you can't just willy-nilly handle it that way. Is there a presidential candidate that you feel supports the right policies on the issues of trans children? Walking around that gently.
I mean, so far there's been DeSantis and Vivek. They've dropped out of the race, but they were some of the two who were most strong on this. And it seems that Donald Trump is tackling this issue as well, which I'm very thankful for.
Well, yes, and I have noticed Vivek and DeSantis, very good, are probably very articulate on this, and I've listened to them a lot. They're very good to hear. And of course, Governor DeSantis is a leader on this from the very beginning, and we have very much been receptive to him for that leadership on this particular issue. He's cleaned up Florida completely, and President Trump overturned that executive order. That was his number one executive order when he came in as president. His first day was overturning the Obama transgender executive order, mandating transgender policies in every school. So we have been following Mr. Trump, and of course, I would think I would be hopeful that his number one executive order, if he is elected president, is to overturn that Biden executive order and restore his order, of course, because I think that was Biden's number one order, was to overturn Trump's executive order. So it's kind of like number one Obama, number one for Trump, number one for Biden, same day, first day, and God willing, we have that reversal if Trump is president. Now, a number of detransitioners have joined you. Were you in the New York Times interview? Just to ask, I'm sorry if I didn't know, or were you in that interview, or were you left out?
I was not a part of that.
What was your overall feedback on that? Fairly accurate article. Did you get a chance to look at it?
It was the one with about 12 other detransitioners, right?
Yes.
Sorry, there's been a lot of them released since then, so I can't like remember all of them, but I think I remember it being a pretty fair assessment and pretty true to their testimonies.
And have the media taken a turn? I mean, literally, the New York Times is obviously the biggest one, but I mean, have you been on Fox? Have you been on Tucker Carlson? Have you been on Dan Bongino, Huckabee? Have any of them reached out to you yet?
Yeah, and I've been on a few of those mainstream publications. I feel like the mainstream media is slowly but surely starting to make a turn on this issue. The narrative is going from it doesn't happen to it happens rarely, and I feel slowly more and more every day that stories like mine are being acknowledged fairly. And really, there's so many of us, and we're really only at the very beginning of the bell curve of detransitioners who are going to come out. It's not something that can just be brushed to the side anymore.
Well, we work on that, of course, we work very closely with breaking issues. We've always treated you as a celebrity, okay? We've always treated you as someone who is at the leadership, the highest levels. And many of our interviews on this little channel with a couple hundred views, we do get on better views on different platforms, and sometimes we get hundreds of thousands of views. But our sense of humor, of course, is famous. And we hope to develop a sense of humor about this with you. You're working with a lot of people who have a sense of humor about horrible things, and they have to laugh at the terrific and horrendous things that are happening to our country by at least understanding that there is a upside to, let's say, Biden being so stupid, or whatever, as terrible as that sounds. And if the media, we've had Daily Wire pick up Ryan Webb as an example. We've had, of course, years. Riley Gaines has been at this for years. Okay. So Ryan Webb is a councilman, America's councilman, okay, from Indiana, Muncie, Indiana. So we promote him. We take people and we come back, like we're coming back to you. And he's a regular. But he's also on, various shows like Tucker Carlson or Fox or Daily Wire with Matt Walsh. So, I mean, the world is your oyster, and you just got to keep a good attitude about it and understand that eventually this, even though I've been working on this for 8 years, back in 2016, it's a long slog, and you're just starting out. I have to say, you're just starting out. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I like that you bring that up because I mean there's a lot to laugh about. There is a lot to smile about. I mean, my sense of humor is really one of the things that's kept me sane through this fight. You have to smile, no matter how serious the situation is, every once in a while, at least. But I have a reason to smile every day, and I see a lot of hope in my fight. Meeting all these detransitioners, these people who desisted before they went on to medicalization, these families who've been affected by this, and seeing all the progress that's been made in our fight so far. It's something that's given me a renewed hope for our country, for our world.
Thank you. We have, I know you've been featured in many news reports. That's what we wanted to bring out here. And the YAF Foundation, I was part of Young Americans for Freedom. I attended many YAF conferences. And, I think I'd have to go back to 1971. I was in Houston, Texas for a national convention in Texas. I mean, as early as 1969, I started my YAF involvement with the founders of YAF Foundation, friendship with them, and many of the other groups like Claire Booth Luce Institute and so on. You're headlining YAF Foundation. How does it feel to be a star of the Young Americans Foundation?
Yeah, I've worked with them before. I've spoken at some of their conferences and some of their events across the country with different youth groups, and they've just been an incredible group to work with, and I'm proud to be working with them.
Well, that's good news for me. I'm actually now an OAF, Old American for Freedom, OAF. But they are, of course, friends of mine for 40 or 50 years, all of them, when they were young. We were interviewing you during CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference, as I mentioned earlier. I was attending the Conservative Political Action Conference. That's another group that I was part of in 1973, first CPAC. It was 300 people. You spoke to thousands of people at CPAC last year, and CPAC is in progress right now, today. And since you were a featured speaker at the last year's, you appeared with Riley Gaines, another hero, fighting shoulder to shoulder with you against men and women's sports. What's your message today to CPAC? What is your message to, as they gather by the thousands today at CPAC 2024?
This issue of transgenderism, of gender ideology, is not one that we can turn a blind eye to anymore. It's something that is affecting every single part of our country and of our society. It's tearing apart families. It's ruining the lives of our children and of our youth, of our young men and women. It's infecting our entire institutions, especially of medicine and of education. And we cannot let our fear get in the way of being a part of this battle. We have made a lot of progress just within the past few years, but we must continue for the sake of our children, of our families, of our country, and for truth.
Thank you, Chloe Cole. Fantastic call to arms, a sense of unity and purpose, a wonderful message for everyone at CPAC. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell.
Sign our Protect Children's Innocence petition to help us get all 50 states on board to stop the mutilation of our children. May God help us.